All right, let's answer the biggest questions that Washington has going into this game. Roman, I'll start with you for no reason other than Lars spoke last. For Washington offensively, this is an Oregon defense that has been the better, more consistent side of the ball for the Ducks this season. And heck, they were even great on special teams, aside from one missed block on a fake field goal against Wisconsin. But that was a defense first, special team second, offensively third, one football game. How is Washington going to try and move the ball against this Oregon defense?
Well, Spencer, there's a bigger question here. Who's going to start?
Who's going to move the ball?
We are still not 100% sure, as Lars and I discussed a little bit earlier this week. We think it might be DeMond Williams, where he just injected some life into Washington in the second half. So let's operate under a world where that's the case, because that just seems to be where some of Jedd's comments have led us to believe. Plus, the way he played in the second half is very, very hard to ignore. He moves the ball with speed, with things like the RPO, with the zone read. There are a whole bunch of different ways that DeMond has shown that he can move the football. The question is, against a really stout Oregon defense, what's going to work? And I think it's going to start on the ground with a combination of the zone read between DeMond Williams and Jonah Coleman, where Jonah is over 1,000 yards this year. Jonah has had a really, really good season. And the question is, if you're able to find a way to get the defense to collapse and maybe take some shots where you like Denzel Boston in those scenarios, you like Jeremiah Hunter, Giles Jackson, insert receiver here as you will. And the tight ends have been really solid too, and Kelechi Latu and Decker DeGraff. They're literally the only two healthy bodies in the room outside of Walk-On and Coots. But they've been really solid whenever they've been on the field. So my question is, are you going to find ways to get into advantageous situations, again, whether it be DeMond Williams or Will Rogers, and find a way to take shots in one-on-one and trust your receivers to come down with the football, which they have all season long? The question has been, will it work on the road, which it has not yet this season.
Yeah, Washington yet to win a road game, 6-0 at home, 0-5 on the road. Lars, I don't know that I've ever seen that before. So if Jedd Fisch, and certainly he is not going to just throw in the towel and say, well, we have no chance of winning this game. Like, of course he's going to try to do that. Is DeMond Williams the best choice to try to give Washington their first road win of the season? Last time they went away from home, it was a 35-6 beat down against Penn State. And yeah, the defense didn't necessarily play great. But as Roman said earlier, I felt like it was more about the offense's inability to keep up with Penn State in that one.
Yeah, and as somebody who made that trip to State College, lovely trip. But it kind of in point, DeMond Williams came in the second half of that game and got them down to, I think, the 5-yard line or 3-yard line against Penn State twice and came away with 6 points total in the second half. So for me, it's a matter of, okay, is Oregon's defense that, in comparison to Penn State? They're pretty close. I mean, we'll find out on Saturday for sure.
I mean, I take Oregon's defense over Penn State's.
Exactly. So now, honestly, no. Kind of point of but with that being said,
it sounded like you were questioning that a moment ago.
Hey, we're the Husky guys. We have to, lean into rivalry week somehow.
Okay, got it.
Well, and I'm on the weird triangle effect being over in Pullman. But with that being said, you would have to imagine that Jedd learned some lessons. DeMond learned some lessons from that game. Almost had a touchdown to Decker. You probably could think Jonah might get it on one of those 2 touchdowns on red zone drives. So there's 14 points right there. And all of a sudden, 35-6, 35-14 sounds a little bit better going into this game, at least a little bit. And for me, DeMond also didn't play in the first half against Penn State for the first time since Eastern Michigan. So Jedd was basically saying, okay, you know what? We're just going to roll with Will and see what happens. And you had a 10-minute drive on that first opening drive. Grady Gross bangs one off the right upright from 42 like he did in pregame, which I thought was hilarious. Actually practiced that in pregame and then banged it right off the same upright.
Practice makes perfect. You can't do it on the field till you do it on the practice field.
For real. And we don't get to see practice during the season. So whenever Jedd says that Grady is making him a practice, we just take Jedd at face value because it's what you got to do. But for me, DeMond absolutely gives you the best opportunity to move the ball. I love Will. Will Rogers has been great in the season, just in terms of what he's needed to be as that bridge gap. But we all knew going into this season and obviously 2025, DeMond Williams Jr. is going to be the next quarterback at Washington. Does that get a running start this weekend? I think there's no other reason why not to. Like, what does Will do that gives you any semblance of hope when you need to create as much spark on offense as possible? It's a great safety net if DeMond ends up throwing 3 picks in the first half and you just need somebody to come in and make it a respectable game at the end. But I don't even think Damon's done that, is able to do that, because Damon hasn't thrown a pick this season. He's only had one fumble, and that was against Eastern Michigan in week 2. So you talk about all the improvements that Damon has made. I think this is the perfect opportunity. Got the whiteout experience, so Austin's not going to be too big a stage for him. There's no reason to not go with anybody else but Damon.
Roman, we've talked about a couple questions that Washington has in this game. Arguably the biggest one, though, is whoever's playing quarterback, how are they going to protect him? This is an Oregon defensive line that is littered with NFL guys. You've got Jordan Birch, who I believe is going to be back, but when he's been out, Oregon's defensive line has been phenomenal this season. And Mateo Uyunglele is playing himself to be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. Derek Harmon might be the best interior D lineman Oregon's had since DeForest Buckner. This defensive line is a unit I've hyped up for a really long time. They've lived up to the billing, arguably, and then some over the course of this year. How does that Washington offensive front match up?
So, Spencer, this is one of the big reasons that Lars and I have been talking about Damon Williams in this matchup. It's because of the mobility that he shows and the ability to create out of structure and the ability to escape the pocket with rushers in his face. We saw him do that multiple times in the second half against UCLA, where they got some good players in that defensive line as well. Watching Jay Toya, man, that dude can play. I'm a huge fan.
He was awesome.
Yeah. So I look at that where obviously, 1-2 players.
Can't wait for Oregon to get him in the portal this offseason.
All right. We're not going to go down that route.
I couldn't resist. So I'm sorry.
No, hey, I respect it. But to be fair, he was already in the portal once, chose to go back to UCLA for whatever reason. But outside of that, Damon's ability to create out of structure and make plays with his legs is honestly one of the biggest things that I think about in this game, and why Lars and I have leaned towards him potentially starting in this game is just finding ways to look at a negative play and say, let's at least get it back to the line of scrimmage. Let's not fall behind the sticks, behind an offensive line that has allowed 24 sacks this season and has been prone to get behind the sticks. And then once this Washington team is behind the sticks, drives have effectively been ended. I don't have any numbers to back that up in terms of how often that happens, but trust me when I say it's very, very high. So that's one thing that I really want to make sure we emphasize there. But Spencer, it's time for us to flip the script a little bit here. One question that was posed by somebody.
I have one more question. I have one more question. Then I promise we will flip in segment number 3. But the question is for Lars, and that's, how has Washington been defending the run this year from what you guys have seen? Because Oregon this season, I think, has done a fine job running the football. Jordan James is over 1,000 yards. Noah Whittington is the backup running back, has been hit and miss. James is the clear number one guy. He's doing well. But there are not a lot of, 150, 175-yard games. The running game keeps defenses honest for Oregon, but it doesn't carry the offense down the field very often. And if you take that away, that puts a lot on Dylan Gabriel's shoulders. So what do you feel like Washington is capable of defending the run this year?
It's kind of a mixed bag, because against USC in that third quarter, that's how they came back in the game, was running the ball. And there was massive. We're talking, I think it was a 12-yard carry, a 13-yard carry, and a 14-yard carry for USC in consecutive plays. And then you go stretch that 2 or 3 drives. The only difference was Lincoln Riley and no other offensive coordinator aside from whoever Kirk Ferentz hired to replace his son in Iowa ended up doing. And unless you have Caleb Johnson, which, again, I love Jordan James, and I think he'll actually probably be a decent – he is a great back. And do we get 22, Whittington, or do we get 23, or do we get 24? Because, again, 22 has the slip on 4th down, is what it is. Sorry, Oregon fans, that bring up some memory there. But, the combination of Jordan James and Noah Whittington, to me, I think if Will Stein commits to it, it could be dangerous, because Washington has been prone to missed tackles this season. They've been gashed a handful of times. I'm not saying it's going to be they're basically middle of the pack when it comes to running the ball or run defense in that respect. So if you can find a way to commit to it a little more, I'd be curious to see how much you could gash them, because Washington and Ohio State have the exact same PFF coverage grade. So the difference might turn out to be the ground game, and I think that's where Washington could get exposed just a little bit.